It's high summer of 2018. I'm sitting in the corner of my 1,300 square foot garden looking out at yards upon yards of raspberries, established perennials, 9-foot tall corn, barrels of potatoes, 4 raised beds, garden artwork, wood chip lined paths, arched trellises, and it all began 6 years prior as literally a pile of garbage, full of railroad ties, rubber tires, broken glass, yard waste. This is my 6-year garden transformation journey. We moved into our home May of 2013, and our property came with a side yard, as we call it, and at the end of the side yard, along the fence line with our neighbors, was just a pile of junk. It was full of everything I just said, that you can see: wood, tires, old mats, you name it. There was even small trees interspersed in there. And in October of that year, I decided to take on the challenge of cleaning out, with some very supportive neighbors who lent me their trailer to dispose of this at the yard's waste site. I cleaned it up in about a month. There are some things that you can still see in the garden, like that big railroad tie that I couldn't get out. It's decorative at this point. So here we are at about the start of the project, and then again at the end of the month of October, it's mostly cleaned up, ready for next year. 2014 was just a year for the garden. Nothing too special. I mean, we started out with optimism, like, hey, we've got this plot of land, let's do something with it. But we didn't know a whole lot of what we were going to do, so we tilled up the space, we put a fence around it, maybe 50 yards of fence, if that, and we planted most things from seed. And unfortunately for us, I think the day or two afterwards, we had this huge deluge, and most of the seeds washed out, and we were just kind of like, and put some of them back, but we didn't really care much. We got some tomatoes, we got, I think, some peppers, some zucchini, of course. We were planting like 3 plants of zucchini, so you got way too much. Look at that wood chip path. It was like 1 bag of chips. How pathetic is that? The only real thing from 2014 was this raspberry bush, which became my entire raspberry hedge. So it was a lot of lessons learned and funny pictures like this taken, but in the end, most of our time was taken up with this wedding. It was wonderful. We got married in August of that year, and that pretty much took out the majority of gardening season. Started out nice and clean, and it ended up pretty messy and full of weeds. 2015 was the first year that I really felt like a gardener. The year started off like any other year. I had to pick the weeds after the spring thaw, then we tilled, and it was our first big expansion. We brought it out 10 feet towards the neighbors and 2 feet towards the street. It's about 1/3 the size of where it ended up in 2018. We learned in 2014 a couple things. We made more paths, wider and thicker with mulch, so we could get to our produce and not step in mud. This is the first year that we actually used and implemented proper vertical gardening. We've got trellises for tomatoes and peppers. We've got a really nifty trellis this year for cucumbers. We were doing co-planting methods. I experimented with, for example, planting lettuce underneath the trellis for the cucumbers, because lettuce likes the shade and cucumbers like to grow up and have the sun. So it was that first time experimenting with those things. I also graded the garden a lot better this year, so we didn't have runoff sending all of our seeds to one direction. It was pretty exciting, I'd say. We had a lot of produce, more so than 2014, but not nearly what we would get in years to follow. But this was the first year that I followed through the entire year and kept up to it week by week without letting the weeds overtake it, and it was a lot of fun. This is also the very first year that I had a YouTube channel. I think this was my 9th video, was a garden tour, quote unquote, tearing down for 2015. So everything from here on out in the video you can actually see in previous garden tours. And it's pretty entertaining watching those old ones. 2016 was amazing. It was the year I decided to plan. Just look at this picture I did in 2016. I've made a whole video on it, and actually I did all of those things that I had planned except for 2 rows of grapevine. You should really check it out if you want to follow along over the years and see how setting a plan can really help you achieve your goals. Anyways, 2016 was the year when I wanted to become a gardening guru, so I started throwing everything on the wall and see what would stick. I watched a ton of YouTube videos, and we decided to double the footprint of the garden. We brought it out twice as deep towards the road, so it gave me twice as much room to experiment. That's really the best way that I learn personally. I learn just by doing. I make mistakes, I get better next year, and we just do more of what worked well. This is the year when I had a lot of verticality in the garden for the first time. We put in 2x4s and we used sisal wire between them on nails, a real simple trellising technique, and it worked wonderfully with our climbing beans. We did climbing melons and tomatoes and all sorts of things. My raspberries were, I think, 16 feet long by then, which felt like it was going on forever. Of course, by now it's like 4 times that long, but it was a good start. I finally had purposeful flowers in the garden. This was the year when a lot of our friends were starting to dabble in beekeeping, so I had pollinators on the brain, and it made a huge difference. I think we got greater yields that year because honestly we had more pollinators going in between all the leaves and just taking care of that pollination. As you can see, this is the year when I just had constant yields once the season started going. It's also the year when I started using Instagram more frequently. You'll probably notice a lot of these pictures are square and they have some filters on them. I had a lot of fun with that. 2016 was also the year when I started doing videos for Home and Garden for Mere Mortals, Steve Ramsey's other channel. HGMM was a fun collaborative effort. I did that for some of 2016 and some of 2017. Many of you came to this channel from watching videos over there, so if you've been a part of the journey since then, thank you very much. I really loved it. You can go back and check these garden tours in my Garden Tours Only playlist. It was fun. We had produce from May until October with some pumpkins, finishing off with pumpkin seeds and carved pumpkins. I even had one of my wife's students. She flattered me wonderfully and dressed up as me for her Halloween costume. Look at this. Isn't that awesome? I felt great. It's the hat and it's the overalls. When 2016 came to an end, I felt very accomplished, and I thought, man, where can we go from here? It started off with that solarizing video and some experimenting with that, and it ended with just, like 100 or so pounds of produce, and I was astonished. 2017. Oh, it just makes me so happy to think about it. So if 2015 was 1 unit of space, 2016 would be 2, and 2017 would be 3. I mean that insofar as the total square footage of my garden in 2017 was 3 times the square footage of my garden in 2015. And this is the final size of the garden. I really only brought it out another 1.5 or 2 feet in 2018, and that was just with wood chips. 1,300 square foot is more than enough, trust me. And I can't go any further than this because this was the year that I planted a small orchard of fruit trees. 5 of them, in fact, 2 pear, 2 apple, and 1 peach. You can see them right there. They're in front of the garden, not too close. They're dwarves and semi-dwarves, so they'll be 8 to 12 feet tall. I intend to be quite methodical on my trimming and such. It just felt so terrific seeing the garden come to its final size this year. 2017, I think 2 really big things for me. One, we got into a pattern of growing things that we like to eat. Now that sounds really straightforward and logical, doesn't it? But a lot of people I know just kind of grow stuff that they don't necessarily eat or that they just love to give away. And we started growing things that we like. Staples that come back year and year again. Sweet potatoes, spaghetti squash, tons of peppers. I expanded the raspberries like you wouldn't believe. It was really fun. Oh, and sweet peas. We love sweet peas, and they're so exciting that they're the first thing that you get in the spring, at least with us. Sweet peas and rhubarb. So that was a good thing for that year. And also in 2017, let's see, we got our dog Moose. That was my little puppy. We adopted him in February. And let's see, that summer I also built the arched trellis, that beautiful purple thing, which you'll see grow throughout the summer from an arch, then it gets a door, and then it gets a trellis on the top. And in 2019, I will be building a fence to go around, just a faux picket fence painted the same purple. It really is a sense of place. This was the year that I first started adding color, paint color, with decorations in the garden. And it's exciting to see that take over. Speaking of taking over, this was the year I planted a ton of vining vegetables. So squashes and melons, pumpkins, which was squash, but even my potatoes, they went vine crazy. So it seemed like the back third of my garden was overrun with vine greens. It was pretty exciting. Very high yield, a really interesting fall time, that's for sure. This is the first year I tried cauliflower and broccoli in 2018, but I established a better idea for paths. This year I put down cardboard, and I had all good intentions of laying down mulch on top of it, but I never did. But we used that method in 2018. So again, you try new things and then you build on them. The year after this, we built on that method of cardboard, which you'll see in just a minute. But a really fun year and a big year. And as you can see, I was playing around with different art apps to capture the moment. So it started big and it ended big. And now our sixth and final year in this compilation, 2018, which for us in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, started off with a big blizzard on the 15th of April. We had about a foot of snow or so, give or take, but it all melted quickly, and I got to work right away doing raised bed building. This was something I had been working for all 6 years. I had this in the back of my mind. We've got this really dense clay soil here, and there are some things that just don't grow, like root vegetables, carrots, beets, radishes, etc. I've had no luck. So I wanted to build raised beds with the purpose of being able to amend my soil locally. And that's just what I did. These are all amended with some sand and perlite and mulch and things, and I had terrific success. I was able to grow all the root vegetables I wanted, and it seemed, whether it was a placebo effect or not, but it seemed like the vegetables I had in raised beds were just bigger and better than they had ever been before. Now this doesn't mean I wasn't planting in the ground. I had corn, I had sunflowers in the ground, and plenty of other things, but the raised beds, one, they were attractive, and I'm at a point now where I'm blending art with nature, form and function. It's just fun for me that way. And because I had the raised beds, I was able to put down thick layers of wood chips so that I could have a legitimate walking path, because for the last 5 years before this, I just got sick of going out in the garden after it was too muddy. Nobody wants to have muddy feet. So I was able to get all of these wood chips completely for free. It was about 24 yards, which is a lot of chips. It would have cost me well over $1,000. But if you make friends with an arborist in your area, you can do a lot of pretty exciting things. And in my case, I got a lot of wood chips, so that was terrific. And that's really it. This is the continued evolution year after year of my gardening knowledge. The raspberries are terrific. I have 2 varieties now. We've got arched trellises. I've got a series of different kinds of potatoes in barrels. I'm growing popcorn, of all things. How cool is that? We eat popcorn all year round, so why not grow it yourself? Tons of gourds. Like, that piece is a new piece of art. I've got a great big 8.5 foot tall sunflower in the back. It just looked better than ever, and it was so efficient and productive. And over the last 6 years, we've become really efficient with the produce that we grow, and respectful of it too. You know what I mean? I would say 95% of it gets used with very little waste. The stuff that is wasted, I think, is wasted on the vine. I forget to go out and look in one section for a week, and oh, my tomatoes have dropped down. Well, that's fine. They'll just compost. You know what I mean? So I hope this compilation video has been inspiring in some way to you. It started out literally as a pile of junk, and through years of mild interest, it turned into a passionate hobby, and I've become very knowledgeable. I am by no means an expert in anything, sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. But it's better every year, and it's so much fun, and it's therapeutic. You know, when you talk about mental health, this hobby of gardening is just wonderful for me. And now we can include my dog and our little pumpkin. We had a baby this year. It's a family affair, and we just love it. So from this horrible heap of junk, we created a little paradise in our side yard. You can too. Thanks a lot for watching. Happy gardening. Bye, friends.